Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and no, it is not a Sunday release of the podcast. No, it is not a Monday release of the podcast, but it is a Tuesday morning release of the podcast. And yes, if you guys listen to the pod on, when was it? Oh God. Whenever we did Twitter Spaces on Thursday, right? And then I think I released that episode on Friday. I told you guys we would release our Chicago Fire review episode on Sunday or Monday. That obviously didn't happen. And there's a good reasoning behind that. And I already know some people that I'm in a group chat with are going to be like, yeah, we don't want to hear why you didn't release the episode, because we already know why you didn't release the episode, because you've mentioned one of your hobbies on the podcast before. And this is not a fishing podcast, so do not talk about fishing on the podcast. Well, you know what? I'm going to talk about fishing on the podcast for like a minute. So that is why I did not release an episode on Sunday, because I decided, you know what? We're not going to get to bed until 12 o'clock, basically, on Saturday night, Sunday morning. And I was like, great, this sucks, because I want to be up by 6 o'clock, the latest, 6 a.m. we're talking, on Sunday, so I can go out fishing. You know, you got to beat all that boat traffic since I go out on a kayak. You know, I want to get to my spot before all these boats get up there. That did not happen, but we did get out there and get fishing. And by the time that I eventually came back home and everything, man, I was beat from the sun, got sunburnt, and it's crazy too that, you know, it could be cloudy and you still get sunburnt. And it wasn't cloudy the whole day. It was sunny, but that's on me for not wearing sunscreen. But I had a great day fishing, you know, caught my first bass of the season. So shout out to me. On a new rod too, a new rod and reel. So let's go. Obviously, I know what I'm doing, or at least I'd like to think I know what I'm doing. And caught about 10 crappie for all you people that are into fishing. So there you go. A little bit over a minute talking about fishing, but that's why we did not get a Sunday release of the podcast. But we have a lot to get to, talking about the news, talking about this Chicago Fire Philadelphia Union game. We'll talk about our keys to the game. We have not had that segment in a while. We'll talk about 3 stars on the night. We'll talk about the goals, and we'll go over blunder of the week, which I'm sure all you guys, if you guys did not listen to that Twitter Spaces episode, you guys can, I'm sure, figure out what blunder of the week is going to be for this episode. But without further ado, let's get straight into the news. Oh man, where to start? We have 3 news points that I want to bring up for this episode. And I guess we'll start with the smallest bit of news. It's a huge deal, don't get me wrong, but I feel like this topic is going to be the one that we spend talking about, which is Portland Timbers and United States men's national team, and I should add, former Maryland Terrapins midfielder Eryk Williamson has suffered yet again another torn ACL. He'll be out for the remainder of the 2023 season, and that's a huge blow for Williamson, for Portland Timbers, for the USMNT, because like I said, again, another torn ACL. He suffered the injury in 2021 as well. I guess the good thing, if there is a good out of this situation, is it's not the same knee. So the surgery he had in 2021, that knee seems to be holding up well, but now it's the other knee. And you got to feel for him, right? I mean, he's been such a key player for Portland Timbers. There were talks that he could potentially be going to the World Cup with the national team in 2022. But of course, he's recovering from the first blown ACL injury. And now he has yet again another blown ACL. And that just means he's going to miss out on the Gold Cup, because you got to figure that he was probably going to get called up for the national team to play in the Gold Cup this summertime. Now it's definitely not going to happen. And Yeah, you feel for players that have injuries like that where there's nothing you can do, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that you have no control over. The knee's just gonna give out, and I don't know. Like, luckily, fortunately for me, I've never torn my ACL, and hopefully, I never do. I know I was in a situation where that could have happened when my cleat got stuck in the turf, and I'm thinking, man, if somebody comes in with a challenge and takes out my knee, I'm definitely going to tear something. And fortunately, nobody made a challenge on me, and I didn't have to think about the worst possibility. But yeah, I can remember thinking to myself when my cleat was stuck in the turf, I'm like, I'm going to blow my ACL. I'm going to blow my ACL. Somebody's going to come flying in with a challenge, and that's going to be it. And never happened, thank goodness. But yeah, I can't imagine. Like, I'm devastated for Eryk because not only is he one of the best midfielders for Portland, but I think he's one of the best midfielders in all of MLS. And I'm not just saying that because he went to Maryland. No, I'm saying that because he's really came into his own the last couple years for Portland. And these last 2 years have been absolutely devastating for him. So there's that news if you guys missed that. News point number 2 I want to bring up is Inter Miami and CF Montreal have completed a trade that involves Inter Miami receiving Canadian international Kamal Miller and $1.3 million in GAM going to Miami, where Montreal receives Bryce Duke and Costa Rican international for Ari Lassiter. And Miami also have a sell-on clause there for Bryce Duke if he does indeed get traded outside of the league. And this 100% is a an absolutely huge win for Miami. And I know, Billy, you're listening to this and you say, no, I think Montreal, you said hot take too. Let me cut you some slack, I think. You said in one of the group chats that I'm involved in, you said, hot take, I think this is a win for Montreal. It is not. Because, yes, Kamal Miller has an option for the 2024 season, and there's reports that he wants to play in Europe. He wants out of MLS. And so that alone probably made it tempting for Montreal to say, all right, we're going to go ahead and ship you off. But not only that, they give $1.3 million in GAM. If this was a trade between Kamal Miller and Bryce Duke and Lassiter and no money involved, okay, maybe this looks better for Montreal because I don't know. I don't see a way that Miller signs a contract extension, stays in Miami where he's always said that he wants to play in Europe. And if he has that mindset, I don't see why he would change it just because he's playing down in Miami. Now maybe if Miami gets messy, then maybe Miller decides, all right, I'll sign a contract extension. I'll stay here in MLS. I'll stay with Miami because I want to play with Messi. Maybe that's possible. But I don't know. I don't think Miller's going to stay in MLS. So maybe he leaves as a free agent. But you throw $1.3 million in GAM in this deal to Miami. What are you thinking? Like, you just gave them free money. And then on top of that, you allowed Miami to put a sell-on clause in Bryce Duke's contract. So if you sell him, Miami's going to get even more money. It makes no sense to me why Montreal would agree to this trade. Yeah, Bryce Duke, I've been impressed with him. There really wasn't any spot for him in Miami. He was more of a attacking midfielder where Phil Neville converted him to center midfielder, but they didn't really like him playing there. But if they wanted to get him playing time, he had to adapt to that position. And Lassiter, I think, a decent forward. I don't think he's a world beater by any means. I think he's a serviceable MLS player, but what a steal from Miami, right? And Montreal, I mean, this hurts, right? If you guys watched the game from this past weekend, because the Union didn't play till 8:30, Montreal looked bad. And the Union lost to these guys. The Union actually lost to Montreal 3-2. The Union are the only team this season to give up a goal to Montreal. Or I should say goals. The only team. Through what? Week 8 we're in MLS? And I guess technically Montreal's only played 7 games. So through 7 games, the Union are the only reason that Montreal have 3 goals, while they've conceded 17 goals on the season. I mean, that is a dumpster fire of a club, and it gets worse with them making this trade. So, yeah, I know Kamal Miller hasn't played that great this season for Montreal, but yet again, I think part of that is because it's a terrible Montreal team. And so you send him. Okay, I get it. Miami haven't been great either ever since Gregory went out with that injury. But I do think Miami's a better team, a better run organization, a better coached team than Montreal, which is crazy that I'm saying Phil Neville over Hernan Losada. But as it appears that is the case. We will see how Miami can react with losing Gregory, because we know they've struggled since he's been out. Only 2 wins all season, and one of them also against the Philadelphia Union. Miami loses this weekend again to FC Dallas. They're on a current 5-game losing streak since they beat the Union. So I don't know. Maybe it's not looking good that the Union lost to both Montreal and Miami. But again, the point is, Montreal got fleeced, in my opinion. And the last bit of news I want to talk about is FC Cincinnati and Udinese are finalizing a deal for star striker Brenner, according to Tom Burgert. And then I saw more people confirm those reports. And the deal will be $10 million plus add-ons plus a sell-on percentage, according to Tom Burgert. I believe Cincinnati paid $15 million to get Brenner out of Brazil in 2021. So, yeah, they're taking a little bit of a loss, but when you looked at it at the time, it probably was an overspend by Cincinnati. But Brenner had the qualities where he should have went straight from Brazil to Europe. But because a lot of teams were hurting financially for money all around the world, because teams in Brazil were desperate for money, and they took this offer from FC Cincinnati. Nobody else was going to come close with that kind of offer. And yes, Cincinnati now lose out on $5 million. But to have add-ons included in this deal, plus a sell-on clause, I think FC Cincinnati is going to do well to recoup all of that money and then probably earn a little bit extra. But he'll be here until the summertime, so that dynamic duo that Cincinnati's come in love the last year between Vasquez, Brenner, and Acosta will be no more after July. So enjoy that trio while you can, Cincinnati fans. Could Sergio Santos be that replacement for Brenner? I mean, I guess technically on the depth it is, but yeah, Sergio Santos is not the same kind of player that Brenner is. I think Sergio Santos is a terrific option to come off your bench, to rely on him week in, week out. Definitely can't do that because we saw that here in Philadelphia. Just can't stay healthy, even though I know he's been healthy this whole season for Cincinnati. He had a little bit of injury issues early on in his career with Cincinnati last year, but those things seemed as the season went on to get corrected out, and he's been a good player for them. They've managed his minutes well. Has 3 or 4 goals, I believe, already this season for Cincinnati. So, uh, a good player off your bench, but definitely not a like for like replacement for Cincinnati, in my opinion. And they'll probably go out in the summertime and sign another youth striker and develop him well because that's what Chris Albright and Pat Noonan do. But yeah, good piece of business. Udinese is the club that wins the signature of Brenner, which is a little bit confusing too, because reading what some Udinese fans have said on social media, they don't expect Brenner to win the starting job. So I don't know, maybe Udinese changed the formation around to get Brenner into the starting lineup, going to Serie A, where it's a defense heavy league, is a little bit of a head scratcher. Now, I guess if Brenner lights up Serie A, well, then he can do it anywhere, right? So a little bit surprised that it wasn't to a Premier League club, which he was heavily linked to Nottingham Forest in the wintertime. But I do believe Tommy Scoops said on this podcast back in January that all along he believed it was going to be Udinese getting the signature of Brenner. And that so happened to be the case. So let's go ahead and talk about this Chicago Fire Philadelphia Union game. And it's crazy what one goal can do to your confidence, huh? 2 goals in 2 minutes for the Union sees them earn a hard fought draw in Chicago. And Jim Curtin did say after the game that Kai Wagner and Leon Flach were both unavailable because Kai was held out for precautionary reasons because of his hamstring, and Leon Flach needed a injection because of an injury around his pelvis. And Jim said that injury is considered day to day. Maybe a week Leon will be out for, but it's something that he's going to have to deal with all season long, dealing with that pain. And so that's why they held both of those guys out against Chicago. And even without them, the Union were still able to get a result, their first road points of the season. And I do think it's a fair question to ask that, under Garrison Draper, the Union hardly suffered any injuries, and now we've seen Damian Lowe, Andre Blake, Kai Wagner, and now Leon Flach all suffer injuries early on. Now, I mean, teams suffer injuries all the time, and the Union have been fortunate to be healthy the last couple seasons, and I guess it was only a matter of time before they started seeing players get injured. Luckily, nobody's been out for an extended amount of time. Even Andre Blake's injury, kept him out for a couple games. Wasn't months upon months, which we see some teams get hit with. Like we were just talking about, Eryk Williamson tearing his ACL, done for the whole season. For sure, will miss time next season for Portland. So hopefully the Union don't suffer that kind of injury at all. They've been fortunate in that regard. And like I said, I mean, they've been fortunate that they've not had to deal with really any injury issues, and now 4 injuries early on this season. But I think the turning point of this whole game against Chicago Fire came in the 56th minute when Andre Blake is yelling at his teammates to believe, we just need one. And I'm sure if you guys have Twitter, you guys saw the Union repost that audio, repost that video of Andre Blake saying that to his teammates. Maybe some of you guys caught that when you were watching the game, but Andre Blake came up with a big save on Haile Selassie, forcing a corner kick for Chicago. And I thought, 56 minutes had passed by in this game, and Chicago really hadn't done anything impressive. Shouldn't have been leading by 2 goals in this game. Now, granted, yeah, the Union didn't look likely to score either, but the Union shouldn't have been down by 2 goals, 56 minutes in this game, in my opinion. Because 2 of Chicago's 8 shots were on target. So that means that 6 of their shots were off target or blocked. And the Union really took away a lot of those good looks from Chicago. But in that moment, Andre Blake showed why he's a captain, why he's a leader, why he has so much respect from his teammates and coaches. Jim Curtin told me on Friday that he believes that his team's getting the confidence back. But I think we did see the team look a little shattered once they went down 2 goals. That's why you had Andre saying, "Believe, believe, all we need is one." And he's right. They get 1 goal, and then they get another one 2 minutes later from Julian Kranza. And so, shout out to Andre Blake for being a leader, for stepping up, telling these players to believe. Don't get down on yourself. And maybe that's the turning point. We've talked a lot about, okay, what's going to be the turning point this season? Is it going to be that result in Cincinnati? Is it going to be the result down in Mexico against Atlas? Is it going to be that moment in the 56th minute where Andre's yelling at his team to believe? And I think we're going to keep saying, is this the moment? Is this the moment? Because we're all waiting. And whether you want to admit it or not, we are all waiting for the Union just to blow teams out, to get ahead of teams early on, to stop conceding early on, to just take it to teams. And that's what we're truly all waiting for. And I remember Jim Curtin mentioned it earlier in the season, saying that it's not realistic that we're going to blow out teams 5-6-0. It's just not going to happen. And I feel like as fans, as media members, there's people still waiting for those moments, and even the players too. And so that's why we keep saying, is this going to be the moment? Is this going to be the moment? Maybe that moment never comes. But I think we have to, lower our expectations a little bit and say that, this team, for how good they are offensively, they're not going to blow teams out like they did last year. And we got to keep saying what happened last year is in the past. And it's fun. I've talked about it multiple times already this season, comparing last season to this season, because we brought back majority of the team. So of course we're going to compare what the Union did last year to what's going on this season. Happens in all sports. And so here we are finding ourselves saying, is this going to be the moment? This is surely going to be the moment. And, I posted a clip on the Twitter account for the podcast where right before halftime, there was a moment where the front three was indecisive yet again. And they had a chance to hit Chicago on the counterattack. Finally a chance comes for the Union. Kranza held on to the ball too long without passing either to Gonzaga Ua. And granted, they weren't the best runs from Mikel and Daniel, but that's a play that this team has executed time and time again last season. They seem to always make the right run, always made the right pass. And now it seems like teams are being more patient when they're going to challenge for the ball. They're not coming out of position, they're holding their shape. And we saw that a lot against Chicago. We saw that a lot against Cincinnati. And as much as we credit the Union for, going out and making some of these signings that they made in the offseason with the trades, we got to give credit to MLS getting better, for the coaching getting better in MLS. Teams are adjusting to the Union. And when teams are confident, when teams play as a team, we're going to see more close games like this. We're not going to see the Union blowing teams out every single week. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong once it gets warmer out. Once we hit the summertime, where I think the Union in the second half of last season only lost 3 times all season long in the regular season in the second half. Maybe that happens again, but right now I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing teams just be more patient. And the Union, on top of that, they can't force things. They've got to be patient themselves. And you look, most of the chances for Chicago were coming on the Union's left side of the field, which makes sense because Nate Harriel's playing out of position as a left back instead of Matt Real, which is strange because Jim Curtin has told us multiple times this season that Real's the backup to Kai Wagner. But with Kai Wagner being out, it's Nate playing as the left back. So we got to get an answer from Jim on that. I'll try to ask that in this week and hopefully get an answer for you guys if you guys are wondering why Nate's playing left back and not Matt Real. And then you have Jack McGlynn, who has his defensive limitations, and you saw that for the second goal that Chicago scored. He didn't track the run of Suke, the right back of Chicago. And so it made sense why we saw Chicago just attacking that left side of the field for the Union. Because we all know left back is the weakest position, not only in MLS, but in the whole world. It is so hard to get a capable left back that can play good defense and attack. Not many teams have that. And when you're playing a guy out of position, of course, you're going to see that player get attacked. Unless you're the Union. You don't attack the center back playing as a left back in this Sporting Kansas City game. Why the Union didn't do that, I have no clue. Still bothers me because we saw Chicago do it. Okay, Nate Harriel's a right back. He's playing left back. Let's attack his side. But once we saw Nate switch back over to the right side of the field where he's more comfortable, I thought he played well. But playing as a left back for 65 minutes, however long he played as a left back, yeah, he was terrible. But, mentioning those homegrown players, that brings up a good point. Because I asked Jim on Friday about the growth of the homegrown players that played meaningful minutes against Atlas on Wednesday and how no moment now seems too big for those players.
Yeah, obviously some good homegrowns have moved on and are at different places doing very well right now. I give a ton of credit to a guy like Matt Real who came into that game and really helped us and solidify that their right-hand side, our left. Leon also helped as well in a big way. But that's not an easy game to come into cold off the bench to help us make a change. That's really, really difficult. And I always say it for defenders, when you get subbed into a game like that, only bad things can happen, right? Because if you keep the lead, you're supposed to. If you blow it, they look to the changes that were made. So Matt did a great job stepping up there. Nathan Harriel as well stepped in as a homegrown and played on the left, played on the right, locked down some really, really good players for them, and did great. McGlynn obviously makes a big play on the goal. I thought his passing early was really good and opened some things up. That made us a strong group. And then Quinn Sullivan comes in too and gives us big minutes at the end of the game. So proud of them. Those aren't easy games to play in. They're not easy to come into. I can't stress enough, guys, how hard it is to get a result in Mexico. It really, really is tough. And I think it shows that not only our club is getting stronger, but also MLS as a whole is growing and getting stronger each and every year. And we are closing that gap.
Yeah, and Quinn Sullivan was huge on the night against Chicago on that second goal for the Union, beating Kender Burks with skill, who, if you guys remember the last game between the Union and Chicago, Burks was heavily attacked that game, coming out of position a lot. Again, the Union attacking the right back, I believe he was playing that game. So it makes sense. It makes sense. You're going to find ways to attack the weakest player on the field. Sometimes it's a left back, sometimes, it's a right back. But, good teams find ways to get players in 1v1 situations and force them to make the mistakes, like we saw Kender Burks make going in for a challenge on Quinn Sullivan, doesn't get the ball, and Quinn's able to send a great ball in to the back post to Daniel Gazdag, who heads it to Julian Kranza. Did that play remind anybody of the goal the Union scored against New York City in the playoffs? I got a little bit of flashbacks from that. But look, I think Jim brings up a lot of good points about the homegrown players playing meaningful minutes, and especially down in Mexico, where the Union needed to get a result against Atlas. And to have the balls to say, Nate, Matt, you guys got to lock it down defensively for us. You got to lock it down. Jack McGlynn coming up with a huge assist to get the Union's first goal in that game. Quinn Sullivan going at tired legs, stretching the field. None of these players looked out of position against Atlas. None of these players, when they're called upon, in my opinion, they look out of position because I can remember in 2021, and I could tell some of the homegrown players had a little bit of fear in them. And especially when we would play in Champions League matches against Saprissa or against Club America. But now, when they come on the field, you can tell they're confident. You can tell that their other teammates trust them. And that's something that they've had to earn over the last couple of years, but you get that the more you play. And I can look at a player like Quinn Sullivan and say, hey, look, he can make a difference. He has that in him. He can make something happen. And his role's more defined now. And I don't think you could say that 2 years ago. And I'm sure you can say the same for all the other homegrown players. Maybe not Brandon Craig, but he's not playing. And it's kind of hard to play when you have two of the best center backs right in front of you. It's why Stuart Finley got sold over the summertime because he couldn't break into the starting 11 because of Jacob and Jack. But one thing I do want to say, though, and I think we can all agree on this, I mentioned it, Nate Harriel looked much better on the right side than he did playing as a left back. I don't think you could have Nate and Jack McGlynn on the left side of the field anymore. It just does not work out. Nate at times doesn't look comfortable playing as a left back. Jack McGlynn gets beat a lot defensively playing on the left side of the field. And it's probably best to stop playing Nate Harriel as a left back. But we're talking about defined roles for the homegrowns. And people said, well, why aren't we seeing Andres Perea? Why aren't we seeing Joaquin Torres? Where do they fit in inside this team?
No, look, those guys are working hard to get in the team. It's partly, the way the games have gone. It's partly, things as a coach that maybe I can do to find them more minutes. But, as the group in the game went on there, our strategy obviously changed when we get the penalty kick. So those guys are going to still play a big role at this club. I still think that there's time for them to get acclimated and up to speed with things. They're doing a good job. Just decisions have gone against them. So again, we're going to need the full squad the whole year. They're both great players. I know they're both frustrated that they're not playing as much as they'd like. But that's how I want players to be. That's natural. That's normal. And I know they'll play a big role in this season.
Yeah. And I remember Jim Curtin telling us a few weeks ago that, Andres has to learn the pressing cues of this team. And yeah, the Union don't press as much as they did, say, 2-3 years ago, but they still press. And you come over from a team in Orlando where you don't press as much as the Union do. You've got to learn when to press, where the Union like to attack on the field, and their pressing. And so that's going to take time. And you heard Jim Curtin basically say that they've got to adjust. And Joaquin Torres, I think he was always limited. And that's why Montreal was fine with letting him go, where he doesn't really help out defensively. We're seeing that in Philadelphia. And he hasn't looked great other than when he first came on the field against Columbus, making that spectacular turn and then finding Julian Carranza. But other than that, he hasn't done anything, in my opinion, that's really stood out to me. And again, it might just come down to, learning how this team wants to play, learning a new style of play, learning your teammates. All of that, I'm sure, factors into it. And I'm glad Jim Curtin still said, they have a role to play. They still have a future here at the club, where I think some fans just jumped the ship and said, oh, these guys are never going to play again. They have no future at the club. Well, Jim Curtin says otherwise. But I think overall, the Union have to be happy with getting a result, a comeback victory against Chicago, being down 2 goals, the worst lead you can ever have in all of sports. Because the Union had to do traveling from Cincinnati back to Philly, down to Mexico, then to Chicago. And that's a lot of traveling on the body. And a comeback win against Chicago, their first MLS result on the road, in MLS in 2023. I think that's a good start. But I do want to play one less clip for you guys. I don't even know if I'm going to talk about this because I don't think Chicago Fire are going to play this audio from the press conference because I cannot find Jim Curtin's press conference at all. So I'm glad that I recorded this myself. But I'm not sure if this was a journalist asking a question or did a fan break into the press conference?
So this is away from the game. Your contract is at the end of the season, right? And you've been linked heavily to the U.S. men's national team. Can you step in and help the team, please? Do you think you can have an opportunity to step in and help the team?
Do you want to be my agent? No, look, I love it in Philadelphia. This is my club. This is my hometown. Hopefully I can stay, but it's not fully up to me. We'll see how things go and shake out. As far as the U.S. job, I think it's an honor to be linked and even talked about in those discussions. Whatever direction they go, I think they should be very thorough and really look at every option from Europe, from America, whatever the best option is, and exhaust those options. And I'm on record saying I'm just here to help out in any way possible. It could be as the kit man, it could be as an assistant coach, whatever. The national team is the ultimate job. So, but also having said that, I love it in Philadelphia, and I still think we have things that we can work on and get the job done here and lift an MLS Cup. That's ultimately the goal. So still work to do. Thank you.
Well, there's a contract update from Jim Curtin, and we really haven't talked about that much on this podcast, and I still honestly don't want to talk about that situation yet. There will be a time and the place, but that is not right now. We'll wait maybe a few more months before we talk about that subject, but I did think it was funny that it seemed like a fan broke into the press conference and said, "Please, we need you to save the USMNT." And Jim's like, "Do you want to be my agent?" Like the emoji of the dead skull. Like that's the whole picture I have in my head. Do you guys have that image in your head too? Maybe I've just put it into your head, but I cannot believe that is what somebody asked. That was the last question somebody got to ask in the press conference, and that's the question you go with. Come on now. But let's go ahead quickly go over keys to the game because we have 3 stars, we have goal breakdowns, and then blunder of the week. I know we'll spend a ton of time talking about. So number 1, I said you got to limit good looks. That is a pass for me. Only 2 shots on target all game for Chicago Fire, so 100% has to be a pass for the Union, despite giving up 2 goals. One of them was an own goal, and then one of them, it was bound to happen eventually in the first half. And then number 2, you got to win those aerial duels. 9th most headed duels won in MLS, 51% I told you guys Chicago had coming into this game. That is a pass for the Union because they won 28 out of the 58 headed duels. So the Union were good in the air and didn't see the Union have to score any goals off of set pieces, which, we've seen them on the past in aerial duels against teams. Didn't happen this game, but yeah, every ball that they try to play into the air to Kai Kamara or just crosses into the box in general, the Union did a good job dealing with that. And point number 3, I said, you got to be locked in from the start. Don't start slow. And I would say that's a pass because the first 15 minutes of games, we've seen the Union struggle all season long, whether it be in MLS, whether it be in CONCACAF. And despite Haile Selassie getting the best of Ariel at times within those first 15 minutes, the Union didn't concede or allow a shot on target in those first 15 minutes. So I would say those 3 are passes, in my opinion. Again, want to get through this stuff quickly, so we'll quickly go over 3 stars on the night. Number 1 has to be Daniel Gazdag, a goal and an assist. I believe he's the 4th player now in the 2020 club for the Philadelphia Union. 29 goals, 20 assists. Does that sound right to you guys? Going off the top of my head, so the 29 goals might be a little bit too much, but sounds right to me. Number 2 on the night, I want to give credit to Jose Martinez. I thought he was excellent defensively, protecting that back line. His passing ability is so great for this team. Dribbling, we don't see Jose take players on 1v1 a lot, but I think he beat one or two players off the dribble this game. Had about 10 ball recoveries. He was just fantastic in the middle of the field for the Union, like he is most of the time on the season. And then number 3, I would give it to Quinn Sullivan for providing that spark off the bench with that ball, and to Daniel Gazag able to find Julian Carranza. And yeah, Quinn's a player that's just not afraid of going at players 1v1. And at times, that's what you need. You need players that are confident, always wanting to go for it. And every single time Quinn Sullivan comes onto the field, that's exactly what Quinn gives you. So let's go ahead and get to the goal breakdown. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on these goal breakdowns because I'll have a more in-depth video on the YouTube account. Just search The Free Kick or youtube.com/freekickpod, and you can find it that way. So the first goal obviously comes courtesy of Haile Selassie of Chicago Fire. And the Union have Chicago pinned down in their own half. There's 3 players on one Chicago player. You have McGlynn, you have Julian Carranza, and Daniel Gazag pressing. And they're able just to play out of their back. The midfield, Jose Martinez, Ale Bedoya, are pushed way too high up into the defensive half of the field for Chicago. Chicago go from right to left, just spraying this ball. Good passing from Chicago. And because the Union were pushed so high up on the field with their midfielders, they're able to just run in space. And when you go back and watch this YouTube video, the Union actually have this defended well with the back line. They're all following each other. They're all in sync. But because there's no pressure from the midfield, that leaves Bizo in an impossible 2v1 situation. And you see Bizo point out, expecting somebody to cover the overlapping run, and Bedoya is not there in time. And so they're just going to play the ball one time cross into the box. Haile Selassie makes a run off of Nate Harriel's back shoulder and has a tap in. But really, yes, people want to get mad at Bizo for not closing down the crosser in time, but he was left out on an island. Bedoya definitely could have helped out there. And then my whole issue here is not really so much with Nate Harriel, but it's on Jack Elliott. Why he's not getting a foot on this ball when it comes inside the box? You're taught as a center back, anything that comes inside that box, get rid of it. And Jack Elliott just allows this ball to go right in front of him. And I think there's some confusion between Andre Blake and Jack Elliott where both players are expecting the other one to get the ball. They're not communicating, and Nate Harriel just falls asleep completely on this play. Goal number 2 for Chicago, the Nate Harriel own goal. Such an unfortunate goal to concede for the Union. And this comes off of a restart from Chicago where you're seeing the goal breakdown. Suke, the right back for Chicago, goes completely unmarked from the halfway line all the way inside the Union's box where he gets a cross in, and it takes a deflection once Jacob Glesnes tries to clear it off for Nate Harriel's back. But not great pressure from Jack McGlynn or Daniel Gazag when Fabian Herbers comes inside of the attacking third of the field for Chicago. I think Nate Harriel was caught way too high up on this play, where because of that, now Jack Elliott has to come out of position, slot into a left back role because Nate's caught so high up the field. And like I said, Suke is going to make a run from the halfway line all the way into the Union's half of the field into the 18-yard box because Jack McGlynn doesn't track the run. Nate Harriel's caught out of position because he's too high up the field, and Jack Elliott slotted out to that left back role, and so he's out of position. And so you have Jacob Glesnes 1-on-1 versus Kai Kamara, and you have Bizo on Chris Muller. So Martinez actually gets a little bit of a deflection on this ball that Suke tries to put into Gutierrez. And Glesnes reacts to it. Unfortunately, hits off of Nate Harriel's backside. And just a total unfortunate goal that the Union conceded. Again, I'll break down that play a little bit more and the goal breakdown on YouTube. All right, so let's get to the Union's first goal, which was a penalty for the Union. Don't have to break down the penalty itself because, anytime Daniel Gazdag gets a penalty, it's a goal. But you have Gazdag on the ground here complaining that he was fouled. But what I highlight here in the goal breakdown is the challenge from Ali Bedoya on Navarro, where Bedoya kind of pushes Navarro into the boards on the outside. This ball goes out for a Union throw-in, and Jose Martinez is going to take it quickly, find Mikel Ua, and you have Shihos guarding this fine. But I think because Navarro was angry that Bedoya pushed him out into the boards, he makes a stupid challenge on Mikel Ua, doesn't get the ball at all. Clear penalty, and you could tell he's frustrated that he knows it's a penalty, but because he got pushed into those boards, he let his anger get the best of him, and now he just gave up a stupid give me goal to the Union in the 61st minute, and I know Daniel Gazdag converts it in the 62nd, and then in the 64th minute, we have the game-tying goal from Julian Kranza. Again, another restart. Both of the Union's goals came on restarts. Matt Real has a throw-in, and you're going to see in the goal breakdown video, not the best angle because for whatever reason, the Union are throwing the ball into play, but whoever Apple TV has directing these games, they want a close-up of Shaqiri, so we missed the throw-in. And Chicago Fire actually going to win the header on the left side of the field, but you have Quinn Sullivan following the ball. And you have Daniel Gazdag making a run in from his own defensive half, Ali Bedoya making a run into his own defensive half. And so the Union are actually going to have a great chance here on the counterattack where Bedoya, you see in the video, has a ton of space to run into. Gazdag running far post. You have Carranza who's going to make a late run inside the box, and Quinn Sullivan just changes directions on Kender Burks, creates enough separation from him where he can send that ball into the back post. Daniel Gazdag has enough separation between him and his defender, sends the ball into Julian Kranza for a typical Julian Kranza goal. Got the best of Shihos again. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about on the YouTube video, break that down a little bit more because we wanted to rush that segment to get to Blunder of the Week. And Blunder of the Week, you guys know it. It's without a doubt going to Dante Venzeir of the New York Red Bulls for his use of a racial slur in last week's New York Red Bulls and San Jose Earthquake match. And so what we know from this situation is that Venzeir initially denied using the racial slur, but during MLS's investigation, he admitted to using a slur. MLS suspended Dante for 6 matches and fined him $10,000. MLS, we know, has a zero tolerance, air quotes, zero tolerance policy for racism. Point 4, we know MLS is yet to release an official statement. All the info we have gotten has come through New York Red Bulls, and I think at this point, for us to expect a statement from MLS, it's not going to happen. And the last point I want to make is Luchi Gonzalez told Gerhard Struber, the coach of New York Red Bulls, Luchi told him to sub off Venzeir, and Struber absolutely refused to sub him out. And so New York Red Bulls, they released an official statement on April 10th that said the New York Red Bulls wholeheartedly apologize for the unacceptable events that transpired on Saturday night during the match with the San Jose Earthquakes. The words and interaction was inexcusable, and we believe there is never a place for it. We always strive for an environment that is inclusive and anti-racist. Our organization is committed to providing the resources to further educate our players and staff, as well as rebuilding trust within our community. And then Dante released a statement. New York Red Bulls released this on his behalf. And he said, I want to sincerely apologize to the players of the Earthquakes. I will do everything I can to be part of the change that needs to happen in this sport in our world. I also want to apologize to my teammates, coaches, the organization, and our fans. I made a mistake and will take all the necessary steps to grow. I accept full responsibility for my actions. While I did not intend to cause any harm or offense with my language, I know that I did, and for that I am deeply sorry. I will agree to any suspension, fine, and counseling that is handed down by MLS and the club. I will use this opportunity to better myself, reflect, and dedicate my time and efforts to work with organizations that tackle racial injustice. And then a statement on behalf of Gerhard Struber. He says, during a match on Saturday, I made a decision that I thought was best given the information I had at the moment. While there was a lot of uncertainty at the time, with the information that I now know, the right decision would have been to immediately remove Dante Venzeir from the game. And that's all you get from the head coach. That's all you get. I mean, at that point, might as well not even release a statement. I mean, that's not a I'm sorry. That's a nothing statement. I mean, shouldn't have got a statement at all from the coach if that's all he was going to say, in my opinion. And I'm not sure, honestly, how much more I can say on this subject that you guys haven't already heard or read about. But the first thing I'll say is 6 games MLS? Really? 6 games for a racial slur? That's all you get? 6 games? We've seen longer suspensions for tackles on the field. And I'm not sure how you can have a zero tolerance policy and decide, yeah, 6 games is enough for him to learn from his mistakes. Sure, you want people to have second chances in life for mistakes that they may make, but it's MLS's policy that says zero tolerance. And zero tolerance, to me, sounds like terminating his contract and cutting ties with him. Because what's going to happen when it happens again? You've set the bar at 6 games for any time that somebody's racist. And they've completely, MLS, shot themselves in the foot with this decision. And I'm talking to MLS and New York Red Bulls. You don't want to terminate his contract and get him out of the league? Okay. Then how about a full year suspension? I don't see how Venzeir walks back into that locker room expecting everything to be okay, because it won't. It won't be. Can he learn from this situation? Sure he can. But a 6-game suspension isn't going to do that. You've got to be kidding yourself if you think everything's going to be okay after 6 games. He's going to be a changed man. That, he's seen the light. That's not going to happen after 6 games. What kind of reflections can you truly make after 6 games? A slap on the wrist, that's what this was. Finding him $10K and giving him only 6 games. And I see people on social media say, how can you stop racism from happening in the game? And my answer to that is, well, you got to get FIFA involved. But, it's FIFA. And FIFA doesn't care about racism. FIFA is such a corrupt organization. They don't care. They only care about money. But if you want to stop racism from happening in the game, FIFA has got to take a stand and say, you know what? If you're racist, we're going to ban you all over the world. Doesn't matter what league you're playing in, what division you're playing in. If you were found to be a racist in a game, you were gone. You were banned until we see it necessary to bring you back into the game. But that's never going to happen. FIFA's never going to do that. But I think that really sends a message to players that, wow, I'm never going to play again. My game checks are going to stop if I'm racist. I think that sends a very clear message. Because look, let's be honest. if a fan's being racist at a game, they're banned for life, no questions asked. But why can't that be the case for players? And I think maybe it's a good thing that MLS, New York Red Bulls, haven't terminated Dante Venzeir's contract yet. Because I think if they did, he would just go and sign with a team in a country where they don't care about racism. And now Venzeir doesn't learn anything because he's still playing soccer, because that's what he ultimately wants to do, is play soccer. But now at least he'll get counseling by MLS, and you hope that he'll learn from this situation. So I think I'm in the boat where a year suspension would be good for MLS, for the player, because that way, you're able to work with him, give him counseling and all the training that makes sure that this never happens ever again. Because I can guarantee you, if you would just cut him, he will not learn anything from this situation. He'll just go sign someplace else, like I said, and continue playing soccer. And yes, you don't want any racism in the league, whether that be in the stands or on the field. But I do think it's important that you let people grow. You give them the opportunity to learn. And I fully believe that does not happen if you just cut ties with him, because he's just going to go sign in a country that doesn't care about racism, and he's not going to learn anything. He's still going to just be playing. So at least in this case, you suspend him for a year. You let him learn. You let him grow. And then when it's time to reinstate him back in the league, let's see how much change he has done. And I agree with Pablo Maurer of The Athletic. He put out a tweet and said, if I'm an agent or a sporting director, GM, etc., I'm literally handing out a list of words you simply can't use to every new signing. I'm following that up with pretty comprehensive training that explains why. How does this keep happening? And I'm with Pablo. Teams got to be better. And this isn't making an excuse for Dante at all, but I think teams should tell players, especially from other countries where, it's they're coming into a league where, Spanish is used a lot. English is obviously the primary language here in America. And maybe that isn't for them, whatever country they're coming from. So give them a list. Tell them, you cannot say this. You cannot do this. We do not accept that in this country, in this league. So do that. That's a good step. And maybe it is happening, but maybe it needs to happen even more. And so 6 games, hopefully, I'm not holding out hope that MLS is going to say anything, because we're over a week removed from this situation. No official statement from MLS that I've seen. Maybe it happens this week. Maybe we get an official statement, but MLS really staying quiet on this situation, letting New York Red Bulls be your spokesperson. Not a great look from MLS, but an even worse look from Dante Venzeir for using a racial slur on the field during the New York Red Bulls and San Jose Earthquakes game. So, hate ending these episodes on just negativity, on just disheartening situations in the game that we all love. But you've got to call it out. You've got to call it out when it happens in our own backyard and the league that we all love and care for. So I don't know. I don't really know how to end the podcast. Maybe that's where we should end the podcast. But you guys know I always plug social media and all that at the end. So follow on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Free Kick Pod. Wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. The YouTube channel, The Free Kick, youtube.com/freekickpod. The website, thefreekick.net. But yeah, again, I just disheartening. I mean, just all around that this happened in the league. MLS don't release a statement. The coach's statement. I mean, this was just fumbled horribly. So here we are again, right? Here we are again, but probably no preview episode this week for the Toronto game. So I'll see you guys sometime next week on the Toronto FC review. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.